Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. So this new grooming gangs inquiry, which the far right claim they wanted, is now being undermined at every stage by them. The inquiry is having enough trouble getting started due to the interference from racist commentators, and now some of the abuse survivors have left the inquiry, saying they'll only return if Labour Minister Jess Phillips is removed from it. Yet Jess Phillips is provably the most committed and experienced protector of women from abuse in Parliament. Seemed very odd. But then we find Reform UK are behind the move, and a significant number of abuse survivors involved in the inquiry have written to say actually they'd have no confidence in the proceedings if she were not involved. So what on earth is going on? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So let's try to stick to the facts as known rather than go off into areas of speculation where most of us really don't know what's going on under the bonnet. So first of all, there's already been a very detailed inquiry into this sort of abuse, which the Conservatives conducted and then didn't implement any recommendations from. Labour have committed to implementing all the recommendations, so it seemed to me it would make more sense to do that rather than hold things up with more inquiries. But the government ordered a review earlier this year, and it recommended that actually there is scope for another inquiry on maybe narrower lines of grooming gangs specifically, with a look at ethnicity. Fast forward a few months and the government are struggling to recruit a chair for the inquiry. I don't know the reason, maybe because all the qualified candidates are wary of the toxic as shit political circus going on right now. Make no mistake, people in the Conservative Party and Reform UK do not care one jot about survivors. Nigel Farage has held up Andrew Tate as a role model for young men, and the Tories spent over a decade in power knowing about grooming gangs and doing nothing. Oh, they held an inquiry. Oh, a very detailed inquiry. And then did nothing with the findings. Yes, some Labour politicians in local government also shied away as well, though the government is now led by someone who did not. Remember, it's Keir Starmer, who as DPP first went after the grooming gangs and saw the first ones convicted. He also set up the Crown Prosecution Service to better handle the cases in future. As for Jess Phillips, this is her life. Before becoming an MP, she ran Women's Refuges. Since becoming an MP, she has been famous for years for constantly raising awareness of the plight of vulnerable women facing abuse from predatory men, and relentlessly pushed the issue in both opposition and now government. You could not get two people with more proven commitment to the cause than Starmer or especially Phillips. So imagine the surprise when several abuse survivors involved in the inquiry resign and say they will not return unless Jess Phillips is removed. Now, initially, I wondered if they were frustrated with the process, perhaps. You can understand these victims. They've been ignored for so many years, like ridiculous length of time. Finally, the political conditions allow a chance of headway, and maybe they're dismayed by the bureaucracy involved in it. They just want to get things done at last. That is possible. And maybe there were things going on behind the scenes that seemed unnecessarily bureaucratic to people who don't have a lot of experience with inquiries, right? If any. Maybe there were some Jobsworths involved who seemed to be acting more like barriers than engines driving the process forward. I honestly couldn't say, being on the outside. But to then say that they see Jess Phillips as the problem, that made me suspicious. See, I'm not in favour of always saying, oh, this particular person's a good person or a bad person, so you always side with them or you're always against them. You know, everyone should be scrutinised. There's plenty about anyone, including Jess Phillips, you can criticise and admire in different measures. But when it comes to specifically the fight to protect women from predatory men, Jess Phillips is an undeniable champion. She has literally dedicated her life to it across two professions. Then we find out one of the women is a Reform UK candidate. We know that Farage doesn't actually care about abuse victims. Same goes for Tommy Robinson and the rest. They don't mind associating with known abusers themselves. And we know many of their most prominent supporters are convicted abusers. Their interest here is purely racist, not protective. They never say a word when grooming gangs of white men are convicted. And so there's always a chance that this new inquiry would get hijacked by predatory men who pretend to care about women, but in reality just wanted to kick non-white people out of Britain. Then another group of survivors involved in the inquiry have written to both Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, to say They have such confidence in Phillips that they actually wouldn't be involved if she weren't involved. One felt so strongly she waived her right to anonymity. And then something interesting. So one of the gripes from the survivors who quit was the terms of the inquiry appearing to widen beyond grooming gangs. And, you know, I could take that at face value and go, yeah, well, yeah, we already had a wider inquiry. It took 7 years. If this is supposed to be just for grooming gangs, why isn't it just that? I could sort of, you know, think that's maybe a reason. But the survivors involved in the inquiry writing in support of Phillips have said that came from them, not ministers or officials. They were invited, the survivors involved in the inquiry were invited to discuss, so what sort of inquiry do you want? So what we're getting from this latest intervention from abuse survivors is the government are actually consulting victims about the scope of the inquiry. They're not saying, right, here's your inquiry, get on with it. These are the terms. No, they're actually asking them what the scope of the inquiry should be. One group of associated survivors didn't like it and are blaming not just ministers, but the minister who has most obviously championed protecting women from abuse more than anyone else you could name. And this is the problem that is going to hang over this inquiry. There are lots of stakeholders who are not remotely interested in learning anything or helping women. They are interested only in chaos and the profitable opportunities which chaos provides to disaster capitalists like Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe. They are failing to even find someone to chair the inquiry right now. This is because, although it could genuinely be used to help better protect victims and potential victims of serious abuse, the last thing some of the loudest commentators on it want is progress to be made. Reform UK absolutely depend on Britain remaining dysfunctional in order to win power. The Tories think they need likewise. This will be why Farage has tried to smear Phillips, something Space Karen tried to do at the start of the year. The whole thing is going to be an absolute shit show, and those who claim to want this inquiry will make sure that it is a shit show. They don't want knowledge. They don't want better systems. They don't want protections. They want chaos and misery and disinformation. They feed off it. Remember, do you remember? Let's cast your mind back. Do you remember when Reform UK held a conference specifically to discuss their policies for women this summer? And then Andrea Jenkins couldn't name a single policy her party has for women when asked in an interview at the event. I mean, what a mess. Still, you can't expect every survivor of serious abuse to be closely involved with the inquiry, and Labour should have no problems getting ones who want it to work and aren't interested in political squabbles. But finding a chair for the inquiry has proven to be a real problem. The Tories asked this week why it wasn't going to be led by a judge. Now, some people may think, well, that's a reasonable question. As Starmer pointed out, if you do that, it will take forever. The last one, remember, took 7 years. Something the Tories and Reform UK would both love to see. Because remember, they don't want action. They don't want an inquiry taking place quickly and be in action before the election. They want to string it out as long as possible. And if they're back in power again, they'll do absolutely nothing about it like last time. For example, when the last 7-year inquiry reported back, do you remember the fuss Nigel Farage made about the Tories not actually implementing any of the recommendations? No, me neither. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.